Hello and welcome to another episode of Mordred's Community Multiplayer, Anbennar Chat, joined again by Archmill. Arch, how's it going?
Hello there. Things are going well.
So we'll start with the Great Power list, as we often do. Um, I believe it's a relatively similar list from previous weeks. I think Boyus Garvel may have dropped out and the Greeks made a reappearance.
That is correct.
Any
I
other
think also
changes from last week?
the Wood Elves have reappeared.
And whose
I
slot
believe
did they take?
that is a good question, but I know they weren't on there last season. Yeah, unsure.
Okay, well,
Bjornrik.
no,
Anyway.
Bjornrik's still with us on the list.
Oh, never mind.
Oh, is Ederland not on the list?
They are not,
Interesting. So they must just be off it as well.
indeed. Yeah, the last few spots are very close together. Um, like 4 to 8.
Yeah, and
Relatively
then
close together.
just off the list, Boyascarvo, Ederland. Um, we did, yeah. There's about 150 dev separating 4 through 10 or 11,
Yeah.
which is pretty impressive. So, taking a look at the new world, a little bit of a different map from last week. Drakesguard has grown quite a bit. The Greeks have continued their expansion. Um, Ederland seems to be solidifying their borders. Not a ton of conflict in this region this past week.
Correct.
What's next? Um, it looks like Ederland has aligned themselves with Eberthil from an alliance perspective.
Which I'm not sure I completely understand. Um, but sure. Yeah, they have.
Looks like the
Um,
Greeks are currently diplomatically isolated. Are there wars to come in the New World, or are the New World players gonna attempt to find an ally in the Old World and participate in those engagements?
I'm unsure, particularly because of Aerodant allying Eberthil. What I would have expected is Kaios and Aerodant to ally together, and they could put up a good fight in the New World. So I'm unsure what the angle is going to be for the Greek elves and Kaios. Um, if Necliff is still going to have a part in this as well. Um, One thing to note is that both Boyac Sarvo and Aordan are kind of capped on governing capacity. Um, Boyac Sarvo also has taken all of the privileges, um, so they have to expand through vassals, but their expansion is going to be slowed down. Chaos still has plenty of room to expand, and they still can expand some. But I'm wondering what their diplomatic angle is going to be.
And then you mentioned Boyascarvo, similar to Aordan, they have found a old world partner in Bjarnrik. They seem to be working relatively closely with them. Do you know how much Bjarnrik is paying for the military services, or is Boyascarvo providing them in exchange for spoils of war, potentially the Gnomish colonial regions?
I don't know for sure. I don't think Bjarnrik has paid them really all that much, at least not conforming to the amount of money Boyac Sarvo asks in their contracts. Um, but Boyac Sarvo has, grown their one island holding of Knarhet to a couple more provinces in Bjarnrik's area. So there may have been a deal there to give them more land there. But yeah, and also I don't think Warwick Sarva would need Bjarnrik to go after Gnomish lands. So I'm unsure what that alliance is for, nor what they're getting paid.
And it
What are your
looks like, I was just trying to see, looks like some of this territory may be in a trade company for Boyascarvo.
mm,
Yeah, which gives them some interesting building slot choices. Um,
yeah.
yeah, so we'll see what they do moving forward.
I could indeed see them, have little, one province, couple province outposts all over the world just to get that and those unique buildings to boost up their force limit and stuff like that.
And then from Bjarnrik and Boyaskarvo, obviously, Gnomish hierarchy has been dealt, for all intents and purposes, a death blow at this point. Bjarnrik finally moved in on them, took advantage of a game mechanic to keep Small Country out of the war initially,
Hmm.
but I'm not even sure with Small Country help, due to the number of other wars that Small Country was in, there was much hope for Gnomish hierarchy. Uh, How expansion driven do you think Bjarnrik will be into the Gnomish territory versus it was just removing a rival, as they still have a relatively large border with the Ram Dwarves, and some of the Eskin nations as well. Um, which direction do you see Bjarnrik expanding in, I guess, is the question.
I do think that they're gonna try to rush much of the Gnomish hierarchy, as the small country is doing as well. But Bjarnik is allied to Arbran, and they may well, have settled on, Bjarnik can go after the gnomes, and Arbran can go after small country, uh, and just divvied up the land that way, have their own little Molotov-Ribbentrop pact, if you will, and just make sure that small country can't get too much of the Gnomish hierarchy, uh, by Arbran pinning them down, and then Bjarnrik can take more of that land. So
And
I do
then
see them expand there.
you mentioned small country Arbrand, a little bit of tension there over some territories that have been exchanged back and forth over the past couple of wars. Dameshead still is an incredibly valuable node. Arbrand now with the majority or the plurality, taking over a small lead on the small country. How much conflict do you see in the Empire moving forward? You've got Conwell essentially surrounding Jaberd. You've got Abencoast starting to leave their island and pick up a few outposts across the coasts of the Empire. Um, Vern still has quite a bit of AI to eat, but is there significant blue flames in the future between Small Country Arboran, between Conwell Jaberd, between Abencost and whomever?
Yeah, I've seen a very tight knit alliance chain come to exist between Abacost, Conwell, and Vern, and they seem to have settled on some borders uh, between the three of them, and Jaberd has been dropped by Arbran, and now it's looking in a quite dire situation. Uh, Conwell has managed to expand very rapidly, and Gibert has gone tall to quite some lengths. And I don't see them, getting out of this now that Arbran has, e- abandoned them effectively. Will there be blue flames? For sure. Uh, Definitely, Vern has something against a small country for supporting their enemies. Um, Arbran has some issues with the small country. Yeah, no, I think we will see blue flames in the area.
And then two of the big wild cards from an Imperial War perspective, obviously, Laurent and Eberthil, both on the Great Power list, both with uh, relatively large armies that they could bring to bear, about 250 from Laurent, almost 200 from Eberthil. How do you see them impacting politics in this region moving forward?
I think that Eberthiel seems unwilling to really engage much on the continent. Kind of like in a Villanelle game, they're kind of being the GB, um, and just they're there, but they're not really getting involved. I think Laurent has to pick a side when it comes to either go for stick with small country or go with Vern. Um, and they can really be a kingmaker there because the small country and Laurent can put up a very good fight against Vern, um, and vice versa. If Laurent turns against the small country, that may be more easy expansion from there for them, um, and it would solidify small country's demise as surely an Amber Cost and Arboran will jump in on that, uh, and we'll see a partition of the small country.
And then shifting back to Eberthil, you mentioned their naval focus for the game. They have scooped up quite a few islands in what I would call the Phoenix Empire's sphere of control. Any possibility of tensions flaring up between those two nations?
Maybe, but I think the Phoenix Empire is mostly worried about the Lake Federation and is going to focus their attention more on easy expansion into Rahan, get them more power, and not going after Eberthiel. And I don't think Eberthiel is going to make a move against Phoenix Empire full stop. So it depends on if Phoenix Empire really wants those islands back. And I don't think they will prioritize getting those islands over, you know, everything else they can get, and also bringing them into a larger conflict, which could open them up from attack from the Lake Federation.
And you mentioned the Lake Fed, relatively quiet session from them. Um, Powerful, obviously, 500,000
Mm-hmm.
manpower, uh, 350 force limit, 8 the ogres. Currently allied with the Ram Dwarves, helping out a little bit in their current war.
Mm-hmm.
When are we going to see them having a larger impact on the global stage?
Soon. I wouldn't be surprised if it's next session already, but it could wait another session. They still have a little bit of consolidation to do, but pretty soonish we're gonna have to see a Lake Fed going at the Phoenix Empire, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Lake Federation, besides propping up Orla's MSDR, may also support Alfdal Kansat in other ways going forward. Um, by financial means, by other means, maybe switching their alliance temporarily from Orla's MSDR to Alfdal Kansat, and see if they can be a little bit of a power broker. But I do see Blue Flames soon. Uh, Potentially next session, maybe the session after.
And it's an interesting little web that's been woven here from a diplomatic perspective. Lakefed, currently allied with Ram Dwarves, who are also allied with Cyranavar, who
Mm-hmm.
is also allied with the Phoenix Empire. So
Yeah.
you have what appear to be rivals between the Lake Federation and the Phoenix Empire. With the way the Ram Dwarves have expanded, it's only into Cyranavar or the Phoenix Empire that the Lake Federation can even go.
Yeah.
How are these sides going to work out? Where does Cyranavar fall? Where do the Ram Dwarves fall? Is it the Ram Dwarves and the Lake Fed versus the Phoenix Empire and Cyranavar? Cyranavar obviously expanded tremendously into the mountains this past session when you take into account their vassals, but still allied with the Ram Dwarves. What's going on there? Try to
It's
untangle that for me.
it's going to be difficult to entangle. If my prediction is that the alliance between Orlazam Asdir and Serenivar was mostly from convenience to, for both of them, guarantee some peace on one of their flanks, so that Serenifar could fully commit to Escan, consolidating some more land for their vassals, and Oras Emazir could focus on, you know, Haras Orldhum and Kukdir, and Krakdum for all those dwarven nations that were surrounding them. So that's my idea. And then when push comes to shove, Tyranivar would stick to Phoenix Empire, and Orlos Emissary would stick to the Lake Federation, simply because those have been, their benefactors. I don't think Tyranivar and Orlos Emissary, the Ram Dwarfs, have helped each other really. Um, it's been mostly, a mainstay for peace between the two of them, more than anything else.
And then you mentioned Cyranavar's focus on Eskin last session. Obviously, Marhold, uh, probably the single player most impacted by the absence or the change of the Arbran player and an absence of a Corvuria player. Any hope for Marhold going into this week's session? Or is the final nail been put in that coffin?
I do think there's still hope for Marhold. Um, they do now have Adenica on their side, and I do also think that the Imperials are kind of aware of the threat that the elves could pose, and keeping Adenica and Marhold as a a line of defense, if you will, against those incursions is in their interest. I know that Conwell has already stated that they would definitely help out against Wood Elves. Maybe other Imperial factions would think the same way, and they could I do think they could push back on the Wood Elves, but it would require some unified attention from the different Imperial players. If that's going to happen, I'm unsure. Simply because if, let's say, a small country would support a Marhold, or a Jabert would support a Marhold, or a Denica for that matter, an Arbran or a Conwell may jump on that occasion. Other players may jump on those occasions to to expand themselves. So it's going to be difficult to see, where the opportunists are going to lie on the side of the line, and where we're going to see players help out against the Wood Elves, perhaps against their own direct interests for the short term.
And then when we zoom out and look at the map as a whole, Rehen obviously still quite a bit of land from an AI perspective. The southeast corner of the empire still a bit of AI to chew through. Um, Corvuria a little bit and Eskin a little bit, but otherwise pretty much only player conflicts moving forward here for the most part.
Yeah.
Who is in the most danger of being gobbled up next? Is it the gnomes, Jabard or Gibbard, due to just the position they find themselves in against Conwell? Is it someone like an Adenica who finds themselves with the Wood Elves to the south, Arboran to the west, and Bjarnrik to the north? Um, what's your prediction for uh, the next player to leave the MP, if you will?
I think Jabert and Adenica are both good calls on that. As the Adenican player, I've already supported Jabert. It's not an alliance that is in yet, but uh, that is something that we'll see. And so it could be either one of them. If Adenica gets attacked, that may result in Jabert getting attacked by other players, and vice versa. Um, those are two likely calls, and Marhold obviously as well. The player was unsure if he was going to return because of the situation they're in. So it's gonna depend on how diplomacy shakes up. I think Denica can be relatively safe from Arbran and the Wood Elves for now, but potentially Darnrick may go after Denica and call in Arbran, or you know other ways that those relations may cause some friction and leading to war.
And then Cannon Dwarves, new player there, obviously, this past week. Plenty
Hmm.
of opportunity for them to move through the command and into Rahen in that region, but they do also have a border with Verkal Gulen, which is a vassal of the Phoenix Empire.
Direct border with the Phoenix Empire as well.
Yep. Do you expect them to continue their conquest of AIs, or do you see blue flames in the future for our Cannon Dwarves?
I think they may stick around for a while. It depends on their stated desire for expansion, and how they can deploy it with the Phoenix Empire. I do recall when the current Oftal Kensa player who was playing Magarma, the Ogres before that, they had some kind of understanding with the Phoenix Empire. Because it's the same player, that understanding may continue. Um, but if the if the Phoenix Empire so decides to want to grow Verkal Gulen more, if they think, oh, Afdal Kansat has gone a little bit too much with that one province into Rahen, maybe I should push, strike them down. We could see, Afdal Kansat not standing a chance really. Uh, but it depends. The Phoenix Empire still has many opportunities for expansion, so I'm unsure if they should prioritize going after Ofdal Kanzad because Ofdal Kanzad's growth is way more limited than the Phoenix Empire's. And again, just as well with Eberthiel, uh, if the Phoenix Empire engages into a large scale conflict, that may open up, an attack from the Lake Fed. So I'm not sure if they would want to risk that.
What war are you most looking forward to this coming week?
If we can see it happen, Lake Fed versus Phoenix Empire. Other than that, I am quite certain that we will see a small country versus Arboran in some capacity, and I think that's going to be very interesting too. Arboran has smoothed over relations with Adenica because their new player allowed Adenica to start their mission tree, which is very nice. But if they are going to attack small country, Adenica will answer the call. So that may, get some more fiction, and I do see conflict there continuing.
And if one of our New World nations is involved in a war, besides Boiscarvo in some mercenary capacity, who from the New World is in that war and who are they fighting against?
Ooh, I wouldn't be surprised if Aerodand maybe wanting some action. I'm unsure. They're still a little bit removed from everything. I don't think Kyos wants to get involved. I think they want to focus on their own growth more than anything. Uh, but Aerodand, I think at this situation, really just is chilling, frankly, and want to perhaps want to get involved uh, into some action. So that could definitely be something I see happening. Against who? That I'm unsure of. Considering they're allied to Eberthil, maybe one of Eberthil's enemies. But yeah,
And we'll circle back to the Great Power list. Who's going to drop off? Who's going to pop on?
good question. Uh, Perhaps it again. It depends. Is Servanivar going to be able to continue expanding, or will Marhold muster uh, a coalition against the elves, as we've seen previously? If the latter is true, then we'll see the wood elves drop off, and perhaps Aerodand or Boyaxarvu jump back on again. Um, if some of the new worlders can get into war against Vern, a lot of their great power status comes from their colonial possessions. That may well be Boyk Zarfo going against Vern. That may be a Kaios going against Vern. Considering the list is so tight, um, and indeed numbers 9 and 10 being close to being on the list as well, a lot can shift, but it really is, the one war could decide who's on or off the list between those players at this point.
Yeah, if I had to make a prediction, I'd say Bjarnrik falls off, Aordan pops back on. Uh, I think the
Why do you think?
Greeks are
Mm,
here
yeah.
to stay just because of the amount of AI they can eat into.
Hmm.
And I think Bjarnrik runs the risk of not necessarily falling behind, but not being able to scale as quickly as the Greeks. Um, the Greek, from a economic perspective, I believe, are number one, so can afford top tier advisors. They're unlikely to be fighting many wars,
Hmm.
whereas Bjarnrik may be fighting a few wars and just not able to generate the same amount of mana, not get those same dev clicks that their
That's true.
neighbors are able to.
But Bjarnik does have some free expansion, or relatively free expansion into the Gnomish hierarchy. For Alanor, there's some stuff in Escan. I still see some expansion opportunities for Bjarnik, and not a lot of threat from Boyek Sarvo in the area as well. So I'm unsure. Uh, I don't think I don't see Bjarnik necessarily falling off. Compared to, let's say, Saranavar, or I think they still also have a little bit more expansion opportunity than Aordand. Is another example.
So we're actually reaching an interesting phase in the game with universities and
Mm.
high-level advisors where you can generate mana quicker through development than
Yeah,
through conquest.
that is true.
So I think that's where Bjarnrik's going to struggle. Um, I think they may be tied up in some wars based on their alliance with Arboran, which may slow them down. And I think Siranavar's got relatively easy access into the remainder of Marhold and Corvoria, as well as a decent number of provinces that are low development that they can, once putting universities down, quickly scale up.
You say that, but so does Bjarnrik though, and I do think personally, but I may be wrong. I see Savannahvar getting more opposition than uh, than a Bjarnrik, depending on how the relation between Bjarnrik and Arbran ends up moving forward.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be
We'll
an
see.
interesting one to keep an eye on.
Okay.
And yeah, right now there's only about 12 development or 14 development separating the two, so that'll be
Yeah.
interesting. And only two away from the Greeks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very tight.
Well, Arch, appreciate the time as always,
No problem.
and good luck this coming week. You may need it.
Thank you. Likely. Thanks for having me.